So, 2 down, 1 to go. Here's that crystal cave again, or whatever glowing material this is. And this cave actually has a roof, unlike the other one. Remember this wooden elevator? It's pretty close to the balance bridge, which is the last remaining puzzle we've seen on the island. The other name you might hear for it, though, is Libra's lever. I don't know who Libra is, but lever is an acceptable term for a scale. It just gets confusing because around here you generally use the term for the kind of lever you pull, like this one. First, a brief refresher. If you recall, the reason this side of the scale flies up when the weight lands on it is that earlier we piled a bunch of extra weight on the other side in that little room over there. And now that we've been around the place, I'd say this platform offers by far the worst view of the 3 puzzles. You can barely see the cupola rising over there when it releases the orb, and then you can't see the orb again until it gets all the way to this part. Oh, hey, we can zoom in on it. Yeah, this is where the orb rolls by and knocks the weight down this secondary track. But more importantly, this close-up seems to tell us that the weight is made out of wood. So that should help us figure out how to balance it on the other side. And here's the rest of that secondary track, not much to it. So let's try to fix that counterweight now. There's not much left on the supply bench, because we already dumped everything onto the counterweight. So let's get rid of this garbage. The first thing to notice is that the base is made out of wood, just like the weight on the other side. And furthermore, it appears to be divided into 4 pieces, the same size as those on the bench. So if we think of the other weight as being divided like this, then it would weigh the equivalent of 8 wooden pieces. Now, ideally, we could just put 4 more pieces of wood on the top layer of this side and be done with it. But there are only 2 wooden pieces left on the bench that Savidro didn't demolish. So to solve this, we're going to have to rely on a bit of ingenuity, as well as some long-term memory. There's an assortment of scales in Savidro's laboratory back on Jananin that show the relative densities of different materials. One of the scales in particular told us that 1 crystal sphere weighed the same as 4 wooden spheres of the same size. So naturally, a crystal piece here weighs the same as 4 wooden pieces. So let's try to use this information to our advantage. Let's say I place 1 crystal on the counterweight. And let's translate everything into units of wood. Then the crystal weighs 4 units. And the base of the counterweight weighs 4 units as well, giving us 8 units total, which is exactly what we would need to balance the other side. Well, that was easy. They should make more puzzles like this. It didn't work. In fact, the right side dropped this time, implying the weight is actually heavier than 8 units. So there's something we're not seeing here. Let's see if we can look at that weight from other angles. It still looks like it's made out of wood to me. Let's try looking at it from the top of the elevator then. Something just doesn't add up, and there's got to be an explanation. Aha! Therein lies the rub. One of the pieces is actually made out of crystal. Kind of funny how you can't see that until you zoom in. And that'll explain why the scale was reading heavy. The crystal piece alone carries 4 units of weight all by itself. Now, assuming the other 7 pieces are all made out of wood, then the actual total weight of the ball is 11 units. Now, this angle is not quite opposite the first view, even though this elevator is directly behind the lever. But among the 3 views, every piece has been accounted for. It's a little weird though. That ball always lands the exact same way every time it rolls back up the incline. Apparently it's in a perfectly controlled environment with no chance of slippage. Alrighty. Now, even with this new information, if we wanted to match the other weight piece for piece, we would still need 3 wooden blocks, and we don't have that many. Now, we could try to put another crystal on instead, but that would put us at 12 units. And if we learned anything from Voltaic, we learned that being off by 1 is a really big deal. So we're gonna have to think of something else. So since it's impossible to match the 11 units exactly, let's turn to Saavedra's lab once again for some clues on what our other options are. Another scale we found in there, besides being morbid and rather depressing, demonstrates a law of physics. Generally, a lever will balance if the same torque is applied to both sides. The specific case here shows that an object will balance with something twice its weight, given that the heavier weight is placed half the distance to the fulcrum. Remember, there is a control outside that adjusts the fulcrum here. Now in our case, one side weighs 11 units, so this side could weigh either double that, 22 units, or half that, 5.5 units. But unless you're interested in carefully picking up pieces off the floor, which I'm not, let's drop the 5.5 and instead aim for 22. Unfortunately, 22 is a little large. Can't really get there with 4s and 1s. But there is a third type of block on the bench. That'll probably get us there. This clunker is made out of metal. That seems promising. Well, if you look to Saavedra's laboratory one more time, the other scale in there had 1 metal sphere hanging on one side, and 4 crystal spheres, 4 units each, in a basket on the other side. Multiply it out, and 1 metal piece weighs 16 units. Now that should put us in the ballpark. Combine that with the base and we're now up to 20. Hey, I think we finally got enough lumber for this. That should do the trick. If you try to max out the counterweight, the heaviest it gets is 44 units, which is exactly 4 times the weight of the ball. But there's no point to this, it's just a coincidence. So where do we want the fulcrum? Close to the heavyweight, that's where. Which would be, look at the label, there. Okay, that should do it. Libra's lever has achieved balance, and yellow is its color. That's quite profound. So now that it's supposedly fixed, what happens if we try to mess with the weights now? Oh. Aw, you could climb over that. Whatever. So even though all the machines are working now, from our perspective on the ground, nothing works. The doors are locked, the switches are jammed. We never checked the ones on the spider spinner, but I'm sure they're jammed too. And we can't even replay the working machines just to see them again. Oh well, looks like there's only one place left to go.